Hey folks, Steve here, and this is the first video in our series covering The Dark Summer, designed by Ted Racer and published by GMT Games. So here we go. We did the unboxing video a little ways back, and I am about at the point I can start getting this played. Um, this is the introduction and ideally setup video. And we'll be doing this in my typical style if you're not already familiar, where we've got this introductory video just to kind of talk through the game itself very quickly and introduce it. We will look at the setup, or I'll complete the setup off camera, and we'll kind of look at the game situation. We'll talk a little bit about the just general strategic aims of the sides in the game, and then we will continue in future videos of a sort of detailed playthrough through all 10 turns of the game. This is a 10-turn game, which will be followed by probably some level of a post-mortem video where I just kind of talk about how the game went and how I executed strategies and what I thought worked for myself and what didn't in terms of actions that I decided to take. And we'll eventually get to a full-on review video, much like my other reviews. If you're not familiar with those, you can check some of my other review videos out to see the format for that. So let's just get started with the basic introduction. So this is a member of the Dark series. This one published by GMT Games. The others published by GMT are The Dark Valley, The Dark Sands, and we'll see what else comes out of the pipeline. I'm sure there will be more games in the series. This is certainly the probably smallest or quickest playing game in the series, this being a 10-turn game and a single map. By comparison, the Dark Sands uses two maps sort of connected at the ends, and the Dark Valley is two maps but connected on the long width side uh, of the counter sheet. So this is really a smaller sort of game, probably fewer counters, all things considered. But still potentially a very interesting game. It still uses the chit pull mechanics, so our actions are governed by what chits we pull from our randomizer cup, and we'll use our good old red solo cups for all of that good stuff as usual. And overall, it will be an interesting one, I hope. So far, I've enjoyed all the games in this series. They've all been a heck of a lot of fun. The Dark Valley is epic. The Dark Sands is a great, faster playing game in the series, and I suspect this will be pretty quick playing as well. But we'll have to see. Based on everything that I've heard, because I'm coming to this a little bit later than a lot of other folks, I saw Nathan Wise Guy History, I think is the channel name. Um, he quite enjoyed the game. It sounded like I watched his review, so if you're really chomping at the bit to watch a review video or to learn about this game, there are some other videos out there that cover this. I've sort of dedicated myself to covering as much of the Dark series as I can myself, just because I really like the series and I like to talk about it. So any which way, I'm going to do my series for sure. But if you really want to get some initial opinions, there are some out there. So far, they all sound really good. So I'm expecting to enjoy my time with this one either way. Now, you can see the map here in terms of the scope. Obviously, the beaches along here is where the action is going to start, and is what most folks really think about when they hear Normandy. They really think about the D-Day operations on the beaches themselves, but this game covers a lot more than that. One thing that is going to maybe bother folks right out of the gate is that Cherbourg is off map. So you can see the Contentin, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, peninsula sort of stops right up here, and you don't actually have Cherbourg on the map. It's Volonais, maybe how that's pronounced. I'm sure I'm going to butcher. We're in France again, guys. I don't know if you watch my recent videos. I get into France and I have all kinds of problems with the French language. I'm going to be pronouncing stuff wrong. I'm sorry. It stops here, right? So you're going to miss out on some of the action for Cherbourg, understanding that that was an important location for the Allies to capture, for having a port. The game does represent the importance of Cherbourg, but what Ted decided to do in terms of the design was to sort of change the angle of the map its orientation compared to games like, say, Normandy 44, to lose Cherbourg but gain a whole lot of other territory down here. So Avranches, if that's how that's pronounced, again, I apologize if I'm butchering these. That's included. You also have Alencon way down over here. And so the whole intent of that, based on the designer notes, was that you're not just playing the action of June 1944. The game actually runs well into August. The third week of August is the 10th turn, the final turn. Maybe the game ends before that due to some automatic victory condition. But if you play to the end, you're playing through the majority of June, the second week of June, through the end of the month, all of July, and then again most of August. So you're really covering multiple months of the action, all based on weekly turns. And you have not just the beach and combats for Caen, but you are dealing with Cherbourg, but you're also dealing with fighting down here. There's a box which unfortunately is right in the glare because I have plexiglass on my map. This is a paper map, but I have my trusty old plexiglass on it. There's a Brittany box where the Allies can decide to send units off to Brittany to capture the ports out there, but there is some pro and con to that, and there's some interesting mechanics, I guess I'll put it that way, and we'll get into that more as we get playing the game. But the main thing that I want to point out is this is not just fighting on the beaches. This is the beginnings of the campaigns fighting inland a little bit. And ultimately, the Allies are obviously trying to take territory, to capture ports and kind of get situated and defeat the Germans as badly as they can be beaten, while the Germans ideally want to delay the Allies as much as possible, and even, as we look towards the edge of the map, do their very level best to potentially retreat units off map in an orderly fashion in the late part of the game. There are some restrictions based on victory conditions that keep the Germans from being able to do that too early. They can't just march off the map and that be the end of the game. There are some restrictions around that. So there's going to be this sort of dance where the Germans are going to have to play some very active defense. In fact, the game provides action ship markers to facilitate that. They're going to have reaction markers. We'll look at that more closely later. But really, it's going to be, the Allies are going to go. They're going to operate. They're going to try to make gains. The Germans are going to try to react and contain that, delay them as much as possible. And then again, eventually, probably try to retreat in as orderly a fashion as they can, and hopefully have kept as many units in good shape as they can, because that will, outside the scope of this game, lead to the Germans being in better shape to defend, the rest of France, the Netherlands, retreat to the West Wall, and all that good stuff. But really, the intent is to go beyond just the beaches of Normandy. So when we say it's Normandy 1944, it is region of Normandy, not just the beaches, not just Cherbourg, and just maybe a smaller slice of the puzzle here. It is a little bit of a bigger scope than other games that cover this sort of thing. So that'll be one of the, I guess, if you're going to try to compare this with other Normandy games, this would be one of the, I guess, unique aspects or things making this worthwhile as a unique title, because it allows you to play a little bit more of the inland campaign situation and fight beyond just the initial regions up here in the cities and towns near the coast there. Or near that particular coast, I guess I should say. So I do have the player aid sheets set up because I'm playing this on my two 3x3 tables pushed together. I just have a lot of extra space to work with. So over here I have, actually I'll just bring it over here so it's just a little bit easier to see. We have the terrain effects chart, which is pretty clear and good. Everything kind of makes sense. Something you're going to notice is that if you looked very closely to this, some terrain types have different movement costs for the Allies versus the Germans. This is a sort of abstract way of representing the majority of air power that the Allies enjoyed as a part of this. Now, there are air assets and things that can be used more tactically, but just as a general impact to the game on many uh, turns based on what the weather is, which we'll talk about here shortly, the Germans may end up having different movement costs that is just some reflection of interdiction happening with Allied air support. So if it's clear skies, no rain or stormy weather or whatever, the Allies are going to have planes and they're going to be doing stuff, and that just slows the Germans down. I also have the sort of main player aid sheet for combat. So we have the normal combat results table. This has the typical stuff. Attacker loses a step, or no result, or both sides lose a step, or a retreat, and a step loss if the unit has more than one step. Exchange, defender eliminated. All stuff that, if you're familiar with the Dark series, this is pretty typical stuff. There's also this Cherbourg combat table. So if what's interesting about that box is you're going to have units from both sides in it potentially once you exit the map at that border, and then units in that box will have combat, and depending on the odds results, you're going to have this sort of simplified combat table. And there's a lot of results that lead to an exchange. These usually mean that the Germans are eliminated. So the main thing is, assuming the Allies put enough forces into the box, they will eventually take it. But they have to send the units off to do it, and they have to have enough and in decent luck to get what they need. They can actually take it with a 1-to-1, where they can get an exchange result. The Germans are eliminated. The U.S. loses an equal number of steps up to a maximum. So really, you just want to make sure you have enough to survive that kind of result, and you can win. But there are, you know, if we get 2-to-1, then you're almost guaranteed to capture. If you get 3-to-1, then you're going to get them to surrender. So that's something as the Allies we need to think about. We need to not only get to Cherbourg, but we need to make sure we are there in enough strength to actually capture it without losing too many units ourselves, I guess, is the way to look at it. So there'll be some nuance to that, but something to keep in mind. There's a summary chart for weather effects. So looking at this, depending on what the weather is, if it's sun or cloud, the German units may not use road MP costs, it's very significant. And all these different things that are kind of important. If it's showers, if it's rain or storm, different effects. This will be really important because these are like these special rules. Like, you really have to understand, hey, what is the weather? That means a bunch of different things. The Germans want rainy weather because it means less Allied air. The Allies want nice weather, and so it goes. On the back of this is just another terrain chart, so I'm able to have those two together. On the right side of the map, I have set up the other player aid card. So this has a lot more information just generally on it. So there's a sequence of play. The sequence is pretty basic. We're going to potentially move the turn marker if it's turn 2 or beyond. We're going to draw a chit at random that's going to dictate weather. So in this game, we actually have 2 different randomizer cups. One for the action chits for a turn, and then the other for the weather chits. The weather chits work in such a way that there's a finite number of them. They all represent certain weather, weather types, and you will pull one randomly each turn. You will not get that same chit again. Once it's pulled, it's out, and so there will always be at least one or however many storm, rain, sunny turns. It's the order that they happen is what the players will not know. So you can't imagine for a second like, oh, it's just never going to be stormy. It will be stormy. It's a matter of when it will be that the players don't know, and they have to kind of plan around that, not knowing what the weather will be. And we get replacements. Then the action phase, where we're drawing action chits. The players are taking their different actions. There is an attrition phase in this game, and it has to do with Checking units for supply. The Germans always have to do this, and if they are out of supply, they take a step loss. The Allies only have to do this on rain or storm turns. So again, that weather being a really important factor. There's a cleanup phase, victory check. This tells us about rebuilding units and what kind of replacement types are used for them. This tells us what type, how many replacements of each type each side gets depending on weather. Again, weather sounding important, right? And then the weather also critically impacts what chits you have for the action cup. So on sunny weather, the US gets 4 movement/combat chits. The British get 2 movement, 2 combat. The Germans get 3 move or combat and a reaction, and just so on. Again, the more stormy it is, the better off for the Germans ultimately. So you can see weather has a really big impact on how the game functions. This is unique to this game. The other games in the series do not have this. The Dark Valley has weather, but that weather is stable for a month because each turn is a month long in the Dark Valley. So, if it's clear weather or it's muddy weather or it's mixed weather or it's winter weather, basically, in the Dark Valley, right? Because you're talking about climate. You're talking about what the weather is generally for a whole given month in Russia. In the Dark Sands, you're dealing with Mediterranean desert, and there's just not a whole lot of change for the weather there. But here, weather played such an important role, and so that has its own unique mechanic that affects all the other game mechanics in this game. So that's important to think about. This is a major feature that's different for this game than others in the series. On the back of this is actually other stuff that is not replicated on a different sheet. So there are general rule reminders, just general stuff that's good to keep in mind. And then victory point stuff that tells you how to get victory points and sudden death victories. Now, this is important from a sort of objective win the game strategy perspective, right? How will we reach victory as either side? Well, the Allies can win a sudden death victory if there are no supplied German units on the map at any point up to the end of turn 9. This means this is sort of the rule that keeps the Germans from just retreating off the map and winning the game by doing something like that. They have to stay on the board. They have to fight. If you come off the board too soon, the Allies just win. Because really what the Allies are trying to do is secure a foothold on the continent. And if you're just moving all your units off the board, then they get to do that, right? They win. They reached their objective. They're good to go. The Germans, by comparison, need to capture, meaning close, 3 or more beach hexes, at least 2 of which must be contiguous. So there's going to be probably easier ones than others to close, but they're going to have to do a very good job to do it, to close down those beaches, and that throws the Allies off a timetable pretty critically. If the player controls Cherbourg at the end of turn 7, so this gives the Allies until the end of turn 7 to actually capture Cherbourg. So they have to go do that. It is a must do. They must do it as the Allies. And the German player, if the Germans can win if they control Avranches at the end of any round, after any U.S. unit has entered Brittany. So basically, that just means that if the Germans manage to do a counterattack, once the Allies have sort of moved on west to Brittany to capture the Brittany ports, if the Germans can sort of cut that line and capture Avranches, then they can win. So the Allies have to make sure that town is secure before they go heading off to Brittany. So it just sort of constrains what the Allies can do, and the Germans could potentially try to win that way. Otherwise, at the end of turn 10, you're going to be comparing victory points. So these are going to be counted on some tracks. Some of these are going to be, time-based. So you can see for the Allies, if they capture a certain hex on turn 1, they get a victory point. If they can capture Caen, for each Caen hex controlled at the end of turn 1, they get 5 victory points. That's quite a bit. If they can capture Cherbourg on turn 1, that's worth 10, and a little bit less any other turn. So just depending on when you capture Cherbourg, you're going to get a different amount of victory points. Obviously, that incentivizes the Allies to take Cherbourg as quickly as they can. And then 5, control of all city hexes at the end of turn 10. So that means they really want to be capturing most of the map. They also get victory points for having US divisions in the Brittany box. How many? They get some victory points for getting units off the Eastern exit box. So, pushing the Germans off map basically and following them. And yeah, that's basically how they get their other victory points. So, what does that mean from a strategic standpoint? Well, it means the Allies are going to push. They're going to do, I mean, this isn't surprising, right? They're going to try to beat the Germans back. They're going to try to capture Cherbourg quickly. They're going to try to capture all of the towns on the map if they can, or all the cities rather. And they're going to try to expand from there into France, right? Whether that means going into Brittany for some points, but really ideally pushing the Germans back east and exiting off the eastern map. They're going to get victory points there as well. The Germans, by comparison, they're going to get victory points for eliminating Allied paratroopers, gliders, or British special service units. They'll also get half victory points for U.S. Ranger battalions eliminated. Each Allied paratrooper, glider, or British special service unit on the map or in any off-map box at the end of turn 5. So there's a rule where the Allies must decide if they're going to withdraw these guys. If they don't, this basically gives the Germans victory points. But then it's like if the Allies think they need those units, they sacrifice the victory points, basically. The Germans control Cherbourg at the end of the turn. That's only available on turns 5 or 6. So this, again, if the Allies don't take Cherbourg in time, the Germans actually get more victory points. And then depending on if the U.S. got into the Brittany box or other things like that, and then depending on how well the Eastern exit box situation goes, they will get some victory points. I think as the Allies, it's a very straightforward thing. What do we need to do to win? How are we going to get our victory points? For the Germans, a little trickier. We obviously want to delay the Allies. If we can close those ports, we could try to do it. I don't think that's very likely, but we could try to do it. The main thing would be to delay the Allies as much as possible, and then I guess when it benefits us the most, we try to pull off the east side of the map. But I'm really not sure, like in terms of the victory point counting, how we'll make the best moves as the Germans. So that'll be interesting to see. Just what do the Germans do? What can they do to actually win the game? That will be harder to figure out, I think. Anyway, I've read through the rules. I'm going to probably need to read through them some more before we're doing the turn 1 video. But I don't see anything that's truly crazy in the game. So I think I can go ahead and do some setup off camera. Now I have been working on clipping my counters. All the counters that are needed for game setup I have clipped. The units that are going to come in as reinforcements I have not clipped. And just to save time for myself, I will clip those as they're put onto the map as reinforcements, basically. Or as I have the free time to clip, I will continue to clip them if I'm not actually actively playing the game. And I'm just having low-key stuff going on. I can clip the counters, I guess. So if you see on camera stuff that is clipped and stuff that is not clipped, don't freak out. I'm working on clipping them. Plan is to have every counter clipped as we get playing the game here. So okay, let me do setup, and then you guys will see the real game situation at the beginning of the game. Okay, so here we are with everything set up. I think I've just about have every counter where it needs to be to start the game, and we are ready to go. We will obviously start that in the next video, which will cover turn 1, but we can talk a little bit about the stuff that's on the board and what is sort of set up. I maybe should have put the camera up on the table just so it's a little bit easier to see everything, since we're really going to be operating up here a lot at first. So we'll probably move the camera up for turn 1 to the beaches so we can actually see what's going on a little bit better. But for now, for this video, we'll just keep that camera angle where we're at. But you can see that the Allies are all set up. They are set up on these sort of approach hexes, so in the water approaching the beaches. And doesn't it look cool all set up like this? Like, I just really dig, like, it's got me all hyped to play, seeing everything sort of set up and the invasion is imminent. It's just static, frozen in time here until we start the game. But you do have the majority of the Allied units up here. There is a division line, which sort of separates the Allied zones of operations. So the U.S. is over here to the west, British on the east. Pretty straightforward stuff there. You will notice that there are some U.S. and British units already on land. Here for the British, and then for the Americans, they are sort of over here. These are paratrooper units that have landed already, essentially. So they start the game already on land, situated sort of amongst German units. Perilously so, it can sometimes feel like, I bet. But yeah, so there's a nice little collection over here. These few guys off on their lonesome there, but obviously they'll be used to help the situation as the Allies make their landings. The Germans are kind of spread out at first here, so a lot of their units with actual combat factors are kind of strewn about at some road junctions near cities and towns. The Cherbourg box actually up here has a number of units in it, all fairly decent strength. So you have to imagine like they are in the Cherbourg region, and it is a quite sizable number of units. 8 total units. Some we already know the strength of, and some we do not. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to zoom in the camera a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. I do regret not putting the camera up on the table because this will be harder to see. There are two types of counters on the map that have a question mark for their combat value. There are these Ost battalions, and there are these stronghold counters. I think that's how they're referred to in the rules. Let me just double check. I think it's stronghold. Strong points, rather. Okay, strong points. There's a few strong points. Many strong points, actually, throughout the map, kind of all over the place. In fact, there's some here, and there's some underneath these +3 Omaha counters. So these strong points and these Ost battalions, they have a question mark for their combat strength, and then they have either a 0 movement point, or for these battalions, they have a 4 movement point. So when you do setup, what these units are all supposed to be is face down like this, like you see on the board here, but mixed up and then randomly placed among the designated places on the map. So both players will not know the actual combat strength of those counters when they're put on the map. That is my understanding. I would have to double check the rules. I believe that is the case. Not even the German player knows how strong those units are, what their combat values are. I didn't even look to see what the ranges are. I just did it. I just set it up. So I don't know. I don't know how strong they actually are. I'm sure we'll very quickly find that out. For the Ost battalions, they're kind of scattered in a few places. The Cherbourg box gets 2 of them. So if you're kind of looking at where to place the Ost battalions, 2 of them need to be in the Cherbourg box. But otherwise, they're going to be on hexes that have this little blue rectangle that says Ost on it. It's really actually kind of hard to see when you're just kind of stepping away from the map for a second. But I can tell you that the number of counters matches the number of spaces. So if you're setting this up at home and you feel like you have an extra Ost battalion in your hand that you didn't place, you're not looking hard enough. There are counters, or there are hexes on the map that have that little symbol. You put them on there. Same thing with the strong point markers. So they're a little bit easier to see. They're the hexagon symbol. You just put the strong point on there. Likewise, question mark strength, unknown strength until they're involved in combat, is my understanding. The one difference being that for these Omaha Beach hexes, strong points, you get these little markers that say +3 on them that I suppose adds some strength to those hexes, no matter what strong point markers you randomly place there. So those are sort of like the just holding forces along the beaches. Their intent just to slow down the Allies so that the actual units that have combat factors that are probably stronger can go contain the landing wherever it is. So the Germans basically can't count on those markers being especially powerful, but they are there. We'll see if it screws up the Allies. I could see where when you look across the whole map and you see where these things are at, there's a bunch of strong point markers here. There are some over here, along here, and then the Ost battalions are kind of strewn about in a few places. I don't know, like it, how does it go if you place the really strong ones on the actual initial landing points? Like, how much does that really impact the Allies? I have to imagine that no matter what, the Allies have a pretty good chance of clearing the first hex, no matter what, at the beginning, or else there wouldn't be much of a Normandy game to play. But I guess we'll find out because I really don't know. But yeah, the besides that, the Cherbourg box has quite a number of strength points and units in it. So this whole combat with Cherbourg and capturing it, that will be interesting to see just how that ends up working out. I have all the reinforcements up here, up top, kind of out of the way. I could have put them on the turn track, but yeah, that would have been very crowded. You can see how many counters we're actually talking about. It's quite a few. So much so I had to split off some turns into 2 stacks just so I'm not knocking everything over. So all the Allies stuff I got over here, all the German stuff. If you look at the stack sizes, what you may notice is that the U.S. gets a pretty solid amount of reinforcements across the whole game, but actually has a lot of weighting of reinforcements on turn 1 and 2. And then what ends up being turns 6, 7, and 8, they actually get quite a few. The British actually don't get that many reinforcements, but they get the vast majority of theirs across turns 2, 3, and 4. So, I guess in terms of the big strategy of the game, we should know that as the British, they're going to kind of peter out of their reinforcements after so many turns. So we're just going to have to make sure we, factor that into our decision making. The Germans, by comparison, actually get a steady amount of reinforcements throughout the whole game. They get quite a bit on turn 1. They get a lot on turn 3. They still get a decent bit on turn 2, and really the rest of the turns they get an okay number all the way through. And what will be important as we look at those reinforcements is that they not only have a turn entry marker, turn entry number telling you what turn they come in, but where they come in. And so there are these hexes that are at the edge of the map. So S, over on the east side of the map, there are E's, and so on. That tells us where or what map edge these units actually reinforce from, or where they come onto the board. So it won't be, the whole stack just appears in one place. It'll be separated out a little bit. And then depending on if the Allies have actually gotten east of the map and they've exited off the map, some German reinforcements may not even be able to come in. So that will be a factor as we look at the game. Let's see. The current weather setup for this is showers for turn 1, which is basically, I guess a middle of the road weather allotment for the first turn. It's supposed to be historical. But what we end up having here is, just to kind of show this, so if we look at showers, the action chit availability is 3 US, or for the US, 3 move or combat chits. The British have to pick either 1 move and 2 combat, or 2 move and 1 combat. And the Germans get 3 move or combats, and they would get 2 reaction markers ordinarily. Because this is turn 1, there's some special stuff where the 2 reaction chits are already set up to be played after the special wave markers. So basically the game will start with a first wave, amphibious invasion wave, and then a German reaction marker. then the second wave, and then another German reaction marker, and then from there we start pulling it from the cup. So what is actually in the cup right now for our game are the 3 US chits, the 3 German chits, so not the 2 reaction. And then for the British, they have to make that decision, and I've made that decision. This is something that the German player will know, which, I mean, it's just me playing myself, so what's the big deal? But the British have decided to do 1 move and 2 combat. Now, it's this decision, right? They have to decide, are they going to combat twice or are they going to move twice? And I chose combat as the British. Now, that might be a poor choice. Honestly, I do not know. My thinking for the combat twice is I want to be able to move more later. So my idea is we're going to combat to try to clear out this area as much as possible. That's what we want to have happen. I don't know if that's. I'm probably gonna, like, in turn one. I'm gonna go, crap. The British should have taken 2 moves instead of 2 combats, but um, I want to eliminate those strong points. I want to clear as much around here as I can, so that on turn 2, maybe we'll do multiple movements and we'll try to really drive. If we can, we'd love to, like, push through here, drive through here, and even start jutting east immediately just to start shutting down some of the German reinforcements and stuff. But I really don't know. I mean, it's a total guess for me at this point. I could see where having 2 movement versus 1 combat would be better, but I want to see how this plays out. I'll probably immediately know which is better by the end of turn 1. I'll know what I should have done or if I made the right decision. The victory points are at 0, so those markers on the victory point track don't have anywhere to go. So just to kind of show what that looks like over here again, current weather is showers, victory points at 0, game turn 1, and the action chits that start the game, first amphibious reaction, second amphibious wave, reaction marker, and then from there we'll pull from the cup. And I want to say that's it. I have a lot of other markers off to the side here. So there's a few markers for no entry to Brittany if Cherbourg is captured. These markers we use to denote if the beaches are open or closed. And so there's just a few markers for all of that to denote what all the beaches and whether or not they're open or closed. More reaction markers for future turns. Exit markers to show if the Allies have left the map and where they did that. A few other markers that the Allies have the ability to do. I realize it's kind of glary, so you can't quite read it, but the Allies have prepared offensives and combined action markers that can be used optionally on one of their action chits to modify it. And then the Germans have these action or act chits that are just used to show which units moved or are being activated for reaction. And then the excess action chits that aren't in play in the cup this turn, I just have set over to the side, and I've got some control markers over here to use when it's time to mark control, which I'm not sure how soon we'll need that, but we'll find out soon enough, I think. So yeah, I think we're all ready to go here, guys. We're all set up. We've got our reinforcements organized. Again, I will clip them as they come onto the board. One thing to probably point out is that reinforcements do not come in during a set part of the sequence of play. They come in during movement. So when a side plays a movement chit, you can begin to bring on that turn's reinforcements, but there are limitations around it. It's kind of an interesting, weird rule that is different from the rest of the Dark series, where you roll a die and it's either that many units comes in or half of what is available to come in, whichever you choose. And there's some restrictions on that on certain turns and weather and stuff like that. So it's kind of weird. So just because you see a whole bunch of units for a given turn doesn't necessarily mean that they'll come in. But you'll eventually just reach a point where that equation of either rolling a die or half of what's available, you'll eventually get most everything out onto the board. So there's a little bit of uncertainty when those reinforcements come in, and I like that. So rather than just having a chit that says reinforcements where those units come in, like in other games in the series, this one, it is just with your movement chits. So the more movement chits you have, the faster your reinforcements will come onto the board. And that's a function of weather and everything else. So as those units come on, I will clip them, I will bring them out. But you can already see just in this video my description of weather and how much it affects everything. I mean, truly, it affects so much, affecting the chits, affecting how units move and what they can do. So we're really going to be operating super close with the weather. Like the weather is going to determine a lot of what we can do and how we can do it. And what's nice is you're not in the situation where just due to some like lucky die roll, the Germans will win because it's really stormy the whole game. And it is instead, these weather turns are going to happen. It's a matter of what order they happen that will shift the strategy of both sides. And I think that's kind of interesting. We can't bet anything. We can't just assume it will be sunny all the time. It is going to be sunny some of the time. It will be rainy some of the time. It will be stormy a little bit of the time. We know it's going to happen, and it's just going to be, who knows when, right? We're talking about June, July, and August. The mixture of weather could just be, about anything. We don't have, our meteorologists are not the best in this given situation. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes, guys. But I'm stoked seeing it set up. I mean, this is this way for a lot of games. It's one thing to kind of read about a game and to look at the map and the counters, but to actually see it all set up and it being ready to go, that's the hype. It gets you ready to rock and roll. I'm really stoked to give this a try. So, all right, well, guys, we will see you in the turn one video, which I hope to get to very soon. It may be a few days, just depends on my schedule. But hopefully this gets you hyped for the content to come. And again, I will look to try to change the camera situation a little bit to make it easier to see stuff way up here, since that's the furthest from the camera, and that's going to be where the majority of the initial action will be. So we'll see what happens. So thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit like if you like the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed and you want to see more. And until next time, take care, keep gaming.